By the end of this video, you'll be equipped with a good working knowledge of each of Hemingway's major works so that you can figure out which of his books you want to read first or next if you've already read a couple of these. I've gone through most of his writing. There's some stuff that I haven't read, especially when it comes to his short stories. I'm sure there are dozens of his short stories that I haven't read, but as far as his major novels go, I've read all of them. And so I have some brief thoughts to share with you, and I'm gonna get in and out as quickly as I can. The Old Man and the Sea is on my Kindle, but of his major works, it's the shortest and it's an excellent place to start. By the time you finish The Old Man and the Sea, which can be done in one sitting, you'll have a really good understanding of why he's such a renowned writer. He builds trust with his readers pretty much immediately because of how sure he is with each of his sentences. Next up is A Farewell to Arms. This is one of my least favorite of his major works, although it is still very good, and it's widely considered to be the best World War I novel. It doesn't really have too much competition. The reason I didn't like it as much is because I tend to prefer his work that isn't set during a war, which about half of his major works are set during an active conflict. Though I wouldn't throw it in with his most notable works, In Our Time is a really solid short story collection, and I believe it's his first. It's definitely really early in his catalog. Before I get to my favorite novels by Hemingway, I want to point out that For Whom the Bell Tolls is his longest, but it should be this long. It's a really, really, really good book, and if you commit to sitting down and taking the time to read it, you will get a ton out of it. I will say that the only passage I didn't like happened about a quarter of the way in. There's this really long conversation that takes place, and while it feels like you'll want to skip it, I would recommend slogging all the way through because you get a lot of really good information about the recent history of the characters that you really can't do without as you get into the back half of the novel. But I will definitely be rereading this one at some point in my life, which I can't say about the others that I mentioned. Again, not because they're bad, but just because they don't stack up, in my opinion, as well to some of his other works. A Moveable Feast is more of a memoir than a novel, and it is Hemingway reflecting on his time living in Paris. So the Fitzgeralds, as in F. Scott and Zelda, are prominently featured in these pages, and I've reread this a couple of times already. I probably will read it again at some point in my life. This is the source material essentially for Midnight in Paris, which is a pretty good and pretty popular movie. And lastly, I want to mention The Sun Also Rises. This is obviously one of his most notable works, and it's my personal favorite Hemingway novel. I just read it for the first time this year, and I was absolutely blown away. It's not often that I sit down and read for a lot longer than I'm planning to. Usually I'll carve out like about an hour, or maybe I'll read, say, like while I'm doing laundry. I stayed up late to finish this one, and that really is saying a lot because I have a full-time working schedule, and that kind of time is hard to come by. If I stay up late, I'm gonna pay for it later in the week, but it was well worth it for this one. So again, the point of this video was not to go in depth with each of these novels, but I did just want to equip you with some good working knowledge of each of these books so that as you're deciding which of his books to get into, you can have some good context before diving in. So kind of to sum up, The Sun Also Rises is my personal favorite Hemingway novel. The characters are all pretty traumatized, but they're trying to live sort of normal working lives after one of the world wars, and all of them are dealing with their personal demons in their own way. It's really funny and is dark at times, but it's a super rewarding read. And I do just want to reiterate that The Old Man and the Sea is the best place to start if you're just getting into Hemingway. So hopefully you got something out of this video and you're feeling a little bit more sure of yourself as you pick the next Hemingway book that you're gonna read. If this was of interest to you, consider subscribing. I'm gonna be making book-related content indefinitely, and I really enjoy making these brief review videos after I've finished reading all of the major works of certain authors. Up next will most likely be Toni Morrison. I'm working through all of her major works now, and at some point, I can't say by when, I will have read everything by her, not just her most popular works. So I guess stay tuned for that one at some point down the line. Before you go, if you've read a few of Hemingway's books, I'm really curious to hear what your personal favorite is, why you like it so much, and maybe some thoughts about which of his books you would say are skippable, especially in comparison to some of his others. I find that most people have very different opinions about this, and so looking forward to reading some comments here.